There is a very serious crisis going on right now around the world surrounding mental health, specifically men's mental health. And it is a crisis, it is a situation that not a lot of people are talking about. It is not getting enough coverage on, mainstream or social media. And it really does seem to come from a lack of awareness. People just don't seem to understand how serious the situation is right now surrounding men's mental health. This crisis is being upheld by the age-old stigma that men can't speak about their feelings, that they shouldn't share, their struggles. And a lot of people continue to struggle in silence because of these stigmas, because they feel like they can't open up. And it seems like more and more each and every day, more young men are suffering due to this stigma that does not allow them to open up to many other people. It is currently November 2022, also known as Movember, the annual time of year where men grow their facial hair in order to raise awareness and funds towards not just men's physical health, but also men's mental health as well. However, despite it being Movember, I'm seeing very little talk and coverage surrounding the topic of men's mental health. Very little chatter on social media, not much awareness being put out there. Even mainstream media is staying pretty quiet on the topic of, supporting men's mental health initiatives. And it just doesn't really make any sense to me. And this also extends beyond just November, because men's mental health is something that is rarely talked about on the other 11 months of the year, which makes it even more confusing. The reason it's confusing is because of the glaring statistics when it comes to men's mental health and the amount of people, the amount of young men we lose to things like suicide due to their mental health struggles every single year. In Canada, men account for 3 out of every 4 suicides, and it is the second leading cause of death in Canada for men under the age of 50. In the UK, nearly 12 men a day take their lives at a rate 3 times higher than that of women. It is the single largest cause of death in the UK for men under 50. In the United States, males represent 79% of suicides every single year, with nearly 105 men a day taking their own lives. Suicide is the second most common reason for death in the United States for men under the age of 45. Truly, men's mental health, a crisis that has been going on for so many years now, is not talked about enough. And I think that this stigma that I mentioned before, not being able to talk about your feelings as a man, not being able to express your emotions as a man without being looked down upon by society, is one of the biggest reasons that a lot of people struggle in silence and truly don't come out of their shell to express how they're feeling. Traditional masculine norms in society don't help this stigma. Things that we kind of have been ingrained with since we were born. Things like being told not to show weakness, to toughen up, to be a man, that boys don't cry. If you don't manage to accomplish this, if you show weakness, if you show emotion, society tends to ridicule men for this. They tend to look down at them as less of a man and less masculine. And honestly, that's just so incredibly fucked up. Societal expectations of men are also a huge pressure that cause a lot of young men to not speak up about their emotions and just kind of shut up and put up to a breaking point that we should never get to as a society. These societal pressures can range from, society pushing you and pressuring you to find a well-paying job, a well-paying career, the societal pressure of having to find and raise a good family and set a foundation for this family. Don't get me wrong, these are all things that as people, if you strive for, that is amazing. But I think the way society paints a picture and sets unrealistic expectations on men, and then if you don't achieve it, you're considered a failure by society's expectations. I just don't agree with that. I understand why so many young men struggle with this, especially in an era where the economy is not what it once was. Finding a job is not as easy as it once was. There are a lot of people that struggle these days financially, and when society tells you you're a failure because you can't match up to the expectations, no wonder so many people are struggling these days. As difficult of a conversation topic as this is, I think this is something that is of the utmost importance for people to discuss and acknowledge and to figure out a way to get through this crisis together. There are so many young men in the world right now struggling in silence. So many people, to the worst of cases, debating on whether or not to take their lives. And I think as a community, as a world society, as humans, we need to be able to provide safe spaces for young men and men really of any age to express their emotions, to talk truly about how they're feeling, and to help them through their struggles. Because To see young people take their lives because they can't talk to anybody is heartbreaking to, even think about, to imagine, just to even say it. It hurts my heart to imagine the point that people get to struggle so much without support in order to the fact that they want to take their own lives to end whatever struggle they're going through. It doesn't make sense. We need to find a way to tell young men that when they are struggling, to open up, to speak up about it, that this is something that they don't have to go through by themselves. I am 25 years old, living in Canada, and I sit smack in the middle within the second leading cause of death in this country by suicide. So this is a topic, this is something that is really meaningful to me at heart, being a young adult growing up in Canada. I myself have had my own struggles with mental health in the past, and this is something I have not really opened up to many people. And I don't necessarily think I'm ready to open up to the greater internet with my struggles and what I've dealt with in the past. But I also, wish that in retrospect that I was more open to speak about my struggles, that I was more open to talk to people about needing help and just needing someone to talk to, because I know that would have made the process of getting over the hump a lot easier. I have plenty of friends and people in my life as well, young men that struggle with mental health, that don't really open up about it. I also know a lot of people in my life and have had friends who have talked to me and expressed the fact that they've had thoughts of taking their own life. And unfortunately, I also know people and have had people in my life who have gotten to the point of committing suicide because of the struggles that they were dealing with, because of the demons they had inside that they just couldn't express. And unfortunately, it got to a point where they just couldn't deal with it anymore. So mental health is something that has been very prevalent in my life and in the people around me in my life. I'm about to read out a quote from one of my friends who I talked to just a few nights ago on the topic of men's mental health, and I think this quote is a really eye-opening perspective when it comes to men's mental health and how one struggles, but how one can cope with this and have honest conversations with themselves. I think it's important for a lot of men to be honest with themselves when they're struggling with mental health issues. We often just ask why without considering how we got to where we're at, and I think a lot of people need to practice perspective and authenticity, knowing what's true and keeping a level head to understand the reasons for our feelings. There's another side to this, and the fact that I work in the creative industry should lead you to understand where I'm going with this, but I work in an industry where the grind and working hard every single night until you fall asleep is the norm. And as you can probably imagine, that doesn't do wonders for people's mental health when you're working as a creative. For all the people in my life that I know who work in the creative industry, whether they're photographers, videographers, whatever they happen to be, this is obviously an industry that is incredibly tough work. It's a grind. While it can be very rewarding at times getting to do what you love as a career, it can also be very detrimental and very mentally exhausting to have to work in an industry that pushes you to be creative every single day, that, tells you that you need to make something every single day, that tells you have to post something every single day. A lot of that can be incredibly exhausting and also very mentally taxing. This is something that has affected me over the last 4 or 5 years of working in this industry. Long hours, being expected at times to work around the clock. Like I said, the pressure of having to be creative every single day takes a toll on you. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is very difficult in several aspects to work in this creative industry, whether that's sports, whether that's film, whether that's commercial. It's the same across the board. Oddly enough, despite the fact that I just said that our work can be a cause for anxiety and stress and mental health struggles, I know that a lot of people in the creative industry see their work as an escape, as an outlet from, the real world struggles that we're going through, whether it's mental, whether it's physical. And I, think that there just has to be a balance and an awareness for creatives to understand that as much as you may be struggling, you can't always use work to escape those struggles. And at times you just need to, take a weight off your chest and actually talk about it instead of just locking yourself up in your room to work on that video because you're not feeling great. I think that is a very important thing to keep in mind for anybody who's working in the creative industries in this time and age. Now, think about the numbers I mentioned earlier in this video in regards to men's mental health statistics and suicide. And let's just take a second and imagine how many young men working in a pressure-filled creative industry may be struggling because of what they're going through and don't feel like they can open up due to these societal pressures, due to, the masculine norms that society has put forward. Just think about it for a second. I know several young men in the creative industry every single day compartmentalizing and hiding their feelings, escaping in their work. And to those people, I urge you to take a second, take a minute away from your laptop, take a minute away from your camera, and find someone to talk to. Believe me, that has helped me a ton over the last several years, is just talking to my close friends and expressing how I feel. Don't be afraid to reach out to those people, because there is someone who cares and will listen to you. Work and creative work isn't always an escape. Creative work is an outlet that is amazing, but at times you need to attach yourself to reality and take a step in order to help yourself and improve whatever you're going through. In order to shed more light on this, on the topic of men's mental health and also mental health in the creative industry as well, I'm going to be calling a few of my friends up to just get their thoughts, their opinions on the topics of men's mental health, how we can raise awareness, and what advice they would give to those who might be struggling right now. Yo, what's up, man? How you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm hanging, man. You got a second to chat?
Yep.
Why do you feel like men's mental health isn't talked about enough in society these days?
It's not taught from an early age for us to talk about our feelings and our emotions. And very early on, we just don't focus on it enough. That might be partly due with the environment we surround ourselves with and our parents bringing us up and how they've sort of brought us up. We have that opportunity now because we're in a place where we're comfortable enough to have a full-time job and work. So I call it self-actualization, self-awareness, and talking about your mental health becomes more of an issue because your main basic needs are always met. And that's not necessarily the case when you're here early on in a different country as an immigrant. So
I was watching this podcast. It was called Man Enough the other day. It's with Jamie Fine, Liz Pierce, and Justin Baldoni. And the reason why I reference this podcast is they framed this response pretty well. These are not my words, not necessarily my concept, and I'm probably not even quoting this correctly, but basically everyone knows we need to talk about health. Everyone knows we need to talk about mental health. And I'll go so far as to say that people know generally that men's wellness, men's health, men's mental health needs to be discussed, but I think that to talk about men's health on a signpost and parading it down, Young Street, that's not nearly enough because it disregards the nuance to this conversation. It disregards a lot of the hurt that comes behind silence when it comes to men. Having folks say, yeah, we got to talk about men's health, we got to build awareness around that kind of stuff. I think that you can do that, but building awareness to men's health and men's mental health means helping men in a lot of cases, I think, understand themselves in the way that they may be hurting. So I think that we need to continue to have this conversation so men everywhere can kind of get in touch with the parts of themselves that may be hurting, instead of looking over their shoulder being like, I'm here to help my brother, I'm here to help my father, my son, whatever. It's like sometimes I think that this conversation that's neglected the most, or the conversation that's neglected the most, is the fact that people need to look inward, men need to look inward. And I think that the more awareness we build, the more likelihood there is a possibility that men will realize that they need to look within, acknowledge their own hurt, know it's okay to hurt, and then realize that they're not alone in that hurt.
I think the most obvious answer is, probably because of the way that our society is sort of structured, in that I feel like we sort of socialize, we still do to a certain degree, our young men to, those old tropes, like stereotypes of, be a man and man up and not cry. And I think that leaks across, that permeates our media landscapes, more so than a conversation around feeling, it's still very much an anomaly when you see things that are quite emotional.
I guess I'm gonna be frank with you, man, and I think
that, you know, I think awareness is like a thing that we've kind of hit. Like, I think everyone knows at least a little bit that, you know, like, everybody struggles with mental health. We're not at the point now where, you know, it's like, you know, it's just, okay, you know, women have it or men are underrepresented. Like, everyone's aware that it goes on. I just think it's kind of ignored. And what we should be focusing more on is, like, you know, personal toolkits that everyone should have. It was so weird to me thinking, like, as a man, you know, I'm learning to help other people with their problems and like, do good. And I don't think at any time anyone really asked if I was okay personally, you know?
Yeah.
It was always, like, expected that I must be doing good, and I'm here to make sure everyone else is doing good, which is, it's just a weird thought, you know?
As someone who works in the creative space, how do you manage your mental health, and how do you make time with obviously a really busy schedule on a day-to-day basis to maintain it and make sure you're taking care of it? Well, how do you manage it?
My background's in, like, tour content creation.
Yeah.
Live music, festival coverage, all that different stuff. And like, homie, it was great. And also, it literally nearly killed me. Like, it was so tough being on a bus for 5 weeks. Like, there was the best of times, and also I had, like, daily panic attacks. Like, it is so, and then you also feel bad because, like, we're in this industry where we should be loving the things that we do. I feel like there's this, like, if you question whether or not this is good for your mental health, it almost feels like you're being ungrateful because, like, you get to go make awesome content for, like, some of the coolest sports teams in the world or, like, some of the best music artists that are out there. But then you look inside, you're like, I really feel like I want to throw up because I'm so anxious right now. Ironically, it's kind of like when you get into a new relationship and everyone's like, oh my God, butterflies are dope. When in reality, it's actually signs of you being triggered and you're feeling, like, trauma responsey. Like, is your job exciting or is it activating you? And it's so weird to, like, think that this job that we've all collectively worked so fucking hard to get into, like the driver's seat on, may actually not be best for what's good for our internal happiness and sense of balance.
So burnout's really high in this field. You know, anxiety can be huge because some of us are dealing with really high profile clients and organizations, and, you know, all of that can just be a lot on the mental. And then physically, I think that these jobs, we don't talk about that enough, but physically, these jobs take such a toll, and that eventually affects your mental. If you're dealing with, like, back pain or things like that. So I would say that my relationship with my mental health is, as both a creative and as sometimes a therapist, I am 100% not, like, perfect at it at all. I think we all struggle, no matter what. I think that I try really hard to make sure that I'm taking care of, honestly, the really basic stuff all the time. And I hope that, yeah, like, it might seem really simple, but, like, if you're focusing on, you know, getting some good food into your body, if you're focusing on sleeping when you can, and sometimes in the creative field that might not always be, like, quote unquote normal hours, but if you can find time for your schedule that makes sense and at least get some decent sleep during those periods of time, then you can still manage. So I think that, like, in those, you know, periods of time where things are really high stress or the burnout can be really high, it's about just focusing on the really primitive stuff.
What advice would you give to men who are young men who are currently struggling with mental health, and what message would you want to give to them?
Having someone to go to where you know you won't be judged or looked upon differently because of the way you express your emotions or the fact that you have expressed emotions. I would say also, whatever you're feeling is valuable enough, and it's you have a right to feel that way. I've learned you shouldn't be really suppressing your emotions. It doesn't lead to any good. So you should let them pass through in whatever way you feel most comfortable, whether that's with a friend, relative, or you do end up getting a therapist or journaling. And it's okay to feel like that, you know. I would say always start with the easiest first step. So if that's, you know, accepting the fact that you have to go and talk to someone, or accepting the fact that you have these emotions and you need to let them pass through, that's okay. That first step is extremely important.
You have your wins and you have your losses, and you have your ups and downs. And to anyone who's struggling with that, like, you don't necessarily know where they are, and you know, you can't say one-to-one, I understand you, because everyone's situation is different. But
I think it's worth noting that trying to remember times where things were not as bad, or where things were different, or looking at, things you are maybe hoping will come around the corner, would just remind you that it's not always going to be as bad as it might be right now.
I think that the message that I would want to send to them, that if you're struggling in silence, is to, I think it's a lot harder sometimes to talk to people that you know about how you feel.
Yep.
Rather than to talk to someone that you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And when there's like anonymity involved, like maybe it's a bit easier. So I do think that there's a lot of, there's crisis phone lines, there's different places. But I would just encourage them to, this is like such a small picture thing, but like to just try to reach out, once, twice, to a crisis line, to, maybe if you're in school, it's a guidance counselor, somebody that you trust, a coach. Think about people that you trust and try it out, because I think that that's the biggest thing that I would want to communicate to anybody, is that it's worth a shot to have the conversation.
Ask yourself the question, when you consider the voice that's inside your head that's telling you all the things you can or cannot do, or you should or should not be. Ask yourself the question of whose voice that is. Is it yours? Is it a mentor's? Is it your father's? Is it a brother's? And any time and every time that voice is not yours, feel free to take it with a grain of salt. And all the times where that voice is yours 100%, respect it in the way that you wish someone had respected your voice when you were a younger version of yourself.
I appreciate you taking the time to have this convo. I appreciate you being open and honest and candid. It means a lot to me for sure. I want to conclude this video by reaching out to those young men who may be struggling right now with mental health, really anybody who's struggling with mental health, but just know that there are so many resources these days in order to help you go through these dark times, resources, even the people in your own life. Know that your family and your friends, I'm sure, will always be a resource, a shoulder you can lean on for support. Don't be afraid of expressing and talking about what you're struggling with. I know this is a very cliche line that has been said a lot over, the development of mental health support over the last however many decades, but you are truly not alone. My DMs are always open. My email is always open if you need to talk. But please, if you're struggling, if you're, in a dark place, don't hesitate to use the people around you, use resources. I'm going to have a bunch of different mental health resources down in the description below. Please consider using them if you need help. There is so much more to life than, the dark times. And I would love to see everybody, succeed past this and push past the dark times, because there's so much more to life. And especially whether or not you work in the creative industry, I think every life is valuable. I think your life is important. I think your energy is valuable. So please, if you need help, reach out to somebody. Don't sit quietly. Don't think you're in this alone. You have the support of a lot of people. And for the other people who may not be struggling with mental health, support the people around you. One of the biggest things I've learned to do, and one thing that helped me a lot, is simply texting my friends and family every once in a while and saying, hey, how are you? But going a bit further than that and saying, hey, how are you really doing? And that can make a whole world of a difference for somebody if they're going through it. So support the people around you, check in on your friends and family. It is so important, especially as we head into a new year and the winter. It's a lot tougher to deal with those mental struggles. So take care of the people around you. And most importantly, take care of yourselves and prioritize yourselves and get help if you need it. If you guys have made it to this point in the video, thank you guys so much. Mental health is something that's very near and dear and important to me because of my experiences with it and because of the people in my life who I know have struggled with it. For the people in my life that I have unfortunately lost due to it, this is a very close topic to my heart. So I'm not going to ask you guys to like this video. I'm not going to ask you guys to subscribe to this video. That wasn't the point of this video. What I am going to ask you guys to do is I'm going to leave a link for Movember down below. Please consider donating. Please consider giving, however much you can afford. Every cent counts towards, helping men who are struggling with mental health and helping them find the supports they need and raising awareness to it. Feel free to use the link below to donate. Feel free to educate yourselves on it and spread this awareness, have those conversations. That is all I'm asking of you guys from this video. But once again, I appreciate you guys listening. That means a lot to me. And thank you from the bottom of my heart to sitting through this video and through a very heavy topic. And that does it for me in this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.